And we are good. All right. So, Rachel, thank you very much for being the first official guest for Empower Her.
Woohoo!
Yeah. And so, just kind of briefly, I'll reintroduce what this is about. I've um, been in the logistics and around the logistics world for quite some time now. Whether it was me moving appliances for Best Buy on box trucks and installing these washers and dryers in people's homes, or my mom's stepdad, they have an 18 wheeler. They've been driving for a while, and I know quite a few people who've been in that area. And for me, something that I find really important is, empowering the women that are in my life, in the industries that I'm in, and just doing my part in presenting them and helping give them a voice and put them in a position to express, what they would like to see out of the industries that they work, and just, building on top of what they've already done and what they could do for the young women that are going to be coming after them. So, why don't you give us a nice little introduction, who you are, where you went to school, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Yes. And first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to, kind of kickstart what I know is going to be a great journey with this podcast.
Well, thank you.
My name is Rachel Whitehouse. I am a Kentucky gal, Kentucky born and raised, however, relocated to Tampa last summer, and I'm now a true Floridian. I have the oranges on the license plate to prove it. As much as I still have mixed feelings about being a Floridian.
Yeah.
But my current role is I'm an account executive at Longship Logistics. So we are a non-asset based 3PL. Very similar models to some of their bigger box name 3PLs that you might have heard of. However, we are still kind of building our business, building our company, putting up new locations, a couple a year at this rate. So we kind of are on that smaller side, small to medium, which has been great. So we kind of get to avoid some of those iffy areas that some of those big boxes can have. But, pretty comparable as far as cradle to grave, building your book of business, that training process. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I've been there now for almost a year.
Right.
Actually is a year now, coming up in like 2 days. So that's really exciting.
Awesome. Went by like that, I'm assuming.
It
Um,
absolutely, absolutely. It's crazy in our world.
yeah. So, what kind of got you into logistics? I know we briefly discussed that that's not your background. So, what is it that caught your eye about whether it was the company, the opportunity? Was it someone that gave you a referral? Like, how did that whole process into logistics go?
Yes, and it's so funny you say that, Colin, because no one really chooses logistics. Logistics kind of chooses you.
I like how
I
you
don't know
said that.
many
Yeah, for
people that when
sure.
you were 5 years old, they're like, "Oh, I want to be a broker," right?
Right.
That's not something you dream of. However, I do love it. But my tie into longship and logistics in general was not very conventional. I actually have a medical background. I was going to school, pursuing nutrition and biology. I, was applying to med schools, taking the MCAT, doing all of the things
Wow.
until my senior year of college. I had an epiphany that, my 16-year-old self dream was no longer my current dream, and I was not maximizing all of my potential. I was fighting for my life, and I succeeded academically, but it was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I just had different priorities at that point. So then I was like, okay, now what? I have no idea. I've poured just so much energy and time into this for the last 10 years. So I started just doing a lot of coffee chats, sitting down, talking with people in different industries. And I really just connected the most with people in sales and business. I'm naturally extroverted. I like talking to people. I kind of like the hustle mentality of, you get out what you put in. And so we really just connected. So I chose sales, I chose business. And then from there, it was okay, now what industry? I had a couple friends working at some other 3PLs that kind of filled me in on what they were doing. I actually interviewed around with several 3PLs, had offers from four before I even accepted my position
Look
at
at you.
Longship. Because I really wanted to make sure that I was choosing the right place, the right company at the right time.
Yeah.
And Longship, it was the perfect fit. Coming straight out of college, they're based in Lexington, Kentucky. So I went to school at UK in Lexington. And they're, a title sponsor of the football stadium. So I've been to the Longship Club and I've just seen their logo at, all the basketball games. So it was a very familiar fit. And then as far as culture goes, it's just where I aligned the most. So that's kind of how I got into the logistics world and sales to begin with.
Okay, so now that gives me good information. So I need to title sponsor SMU and TCU and all these other schools
Yes,
to
you
really get
do.
their
That is
title.
how you recruit. Yes. And, it's so funny that we talk about it because we all just love Kentucky sports. My
Yeah,
office here in St. Pete, Tampa, we have primarily Kentucky people that have either moved here or, came down from Lexington. We're definitely starting to get some more Florida born and raised, or a lot
yeah,
of the Northeastern people come down to Florida, but we just love Kentucky through and through. So it just
that's so
makes
funny.
sense that Longship sponsors UK.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
So did you all go to did the Tampa team go to any UK basketball games up there in Kentucky together?
So we did not make it up there yet. Honestly, just been too chaotic. We
Yeah.
definitely have plans. It's in the works for something to happen as far as a full company outing goes. I have
Yeah.
luckily been back to Lexington since moving because I still have family up there.
Gotcha.
So I've, been able to go and visit our HQ and see their amazing facility and all the things that come with it and meet a couple people. But as far as a whole office adventure, not yet.
It's
Also,
gonna be hard to have that kind of
that's a
corporate.
pretty pretty penny goes into that. We're gonna need a chartered plane. There's a
For
lot of
sure.
things.
Yeah. No, I got you. I got you. So it sounds like you've been enjoying Longship as much as you could enjoy any job at this point. And so, with that, what I would like to kind of dive into is a little bit of the intricacies of being a woman in a male-dominated industry and how. So, what is y'all's like ratio from men to women at Longship, at least in the Tampa area? What does that kind of look like?
Absolutely. So we are at 28 employees, and we currently have 3 females in sales as freight brokers, account executives, whatever you want to call it. And then we have one wonderful woman in accounting. So there's 4 of us in our office out of 28, which better than the industry standard, right? We're
Yeah,
we're
for
working
sure.
hard on it. We're trying. We really reach out to a lot of women. I try to, network with other college women in the area, people that might be interested in coming into Longship. So we've naturally started to diversify in that way. As far as Lexington numbers go, I'm not totally sure. I know that they are about similar numbers, but their ratio is slightly swayed because they just have a bigger office. But
Gotcha.
definitely, it is an intentional recruiting effort. We actually just brought on a new director of recruiting. Her name is Bree, and she is
Nice.
incredible. And just being a woman herself, she recognizes that we really need that need. We talk about it all the time. So it's actively on Longship's mind that we're trying to diversify our office, not only by gender, but also just backgrounds, ages. We're really trying to stay away from, that everyone is 21, everyone was a frat bro. We're trying to
Right.
kind of stay away from that culture. And it's been great so far. So just the office dynamic is slightly different than maybe what most people would expect.
Nice. And you mentioned that the broker that you got to work under was super helpful and you got to experience anything and everything that you could within a matter of a week. Was it a man?
It was, yes, it
Okay,
was.
nice. And so let's kind of talk about the dynamic that you were able to work within with somebody like that who was able to show you, anything and everything that you're going to need to expect within this industry and kind of give us a few points as to how he not necessarily held your hand, but how he showed you how to be successful in this industry and maybe some tips and tricks that he kind of put you onto that have led to your continued success through your first year in business.
So I trained under a wonderful broker. His name is Curtis Adams. Give him a shout out. He deserves
Shout out
it.
to Curtis.
Yeah, shout out to Curtis. And he is a wonderful broker. He has an enterprise customer and he is a volume man. He right now is doing, I believe it's at 50 loads a day. So
Whew,
we're talking
Curtis.
volume. He is the largest broker in our company, and he has
Okay.
just absolutely done incredible things. So I was even honored to get to sit next to him and learn
Yeah.
from him. But that being said, I mean, one of the things I respected most about Curtis was that he really did just throw me into the fire just like anyone else. That was honestly one of my biggest hesitations coming in as the first female hire for our office. None of the other women had been there yet, so I was kind of hesitant about, I don't know how we're going to train. Like, this feels weird. The dynamic is questionable, but he just treated me like he would any of the guys. So logistics is intense, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's stressful. There's lots of things going on. And I didn't want to be babied or didn't want to be like oh, Rachel, don't worry about that. We can take it off your hands. No, I needed to be able to take those detention calls, talk to those carriers, deal with the rejections, handle all of that on my own. And he really just was like, here you go. And
That's
it worked
awesome.
out exactly. And it worked out great. So that was just one of the things he really did that was empowering. And then I would say that our general sales manager, so similar to like a team lead, office lead, that same similar position, he cares a lot about, self growth, career growth, leadership potential. And so he really pours into us in that way. So, I mean, the first day I started, on day 2, on day 3, at the end of that week, we just kept checking in, and he would say, hey, what do you need from me? What can we do different? We're trying to figure this out together, because none of them had trained a female broker before, right? This was something that was unprecedented with these gentlemen. So we were kind of navigating it together on how are we going to interact? It is a little different, right?
Yeah.
Naturally, it is going to be a little different. So we were talking about that, and just he was very, very in tune with how we were feeling, what we were doing, what we wanted to see come out of Longship, and where we wanted the company to go. So there was just lots of dialogue, which was really important, because also everyone knows women love to talk, right? We like to communicate about our feelings. We like to talk through things.
Oh
And
man.
he knew that, right? He's been trained.
Yeah.
He has a wonderful wife that definitely has encouraged him to be able to ask a lot of questions. So that's just the number one key thing, is checking in, asking, what can we do? How do you want to learn best? Because you
Right.
can't just make an assumption for, all women or for all people from this background, because we all know that that's not correct. That's not a good representation. So you got to
Right.
check in.
For sure. I like that because I'm in the process right now of building my team with my company. As I said, I was working with someone last year, had a beautiful 9 to 5, great people, but it just wasn't the right opportunity for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like there were a few things, a few missing pieces that I wanted to provide people in the industry with, and I'm a very, very passionate individual. Just like you say, women love to talk. Man, I love talking to women because I
Yep.
feel like that passion gets
Go back and
reciprocated.
forth for hours.
Exactly, exactly. And so I love hearing that you actually enjoyed being thrown into the fire like that. So let's talk about what was one of your earliest learning moments where, like, I know you said having to talk to somebody about detention pay and things like that. What was your first, like, excuse my language, oh shit moment? Like, I don't know what's happening right now, but I gotta figure this out.
Oh, I already know. As soon as you started, I said, I know the exact memory. Day one, okay? Day one of, I was sitting, we were training. We have a great internal sales development program. So, but I was just fresh out of it, right? We just had talked about like dress code, showing up on time. What is a reefer? What is a
Yeah.
dry van? Here's what the weights mean. Here's what a scale is. Like absolute 101 basics. So I came out of that training, sat down, and phones just start lighting up, because obviously on a team, when you're doing 50 loads a day, you got to sell loads all day.
Yeah.
So both phone lines were going on. I had 12 calls, and the broker sitting next to me, his name's Jose. He's wonderful. He's a full-time assistant for Curtis, who I trained under, turns to me and goes, you going to pick that up?
Okay.
I looked at him and I said, and say what? And he was like, well, we'll find out. So I just answer her phone, and they were calling in and wanted to book a load, ended up selling them the load. And I was like
Nice.
trying to figure out our TMS, opening the load, trying to sell it. And of course, it's a produce multi-pick drop, and he's asking questions that I don't know the answer to. And
Right.
it was not beautiful. It was probably a 12-minute phone call versus the 45-second ones that I'm used to. So it was rough. It was rough. But yeah, that first moment I was like, you gonna answer that?
That's hilarious.
Okay. I'm in logistics now. This is
Right.
Rachel.
So with I know you said the multi-pick multi-drop, that's fun to have to deal with that on your first load. And so in the transition from you, how long did you train under Curtis?
So I wonderfully expedited the whole process just because I asked, honestly. Worked a lot of late nights, getting ready, doing things that, push the process up. Typically at 6 months, I got out into sales on my own at month 3.
Oh, congratulations on that. That's awesome. So with that, how did that transition kind of go for you from, being busy with someone else's book of business to now, okay, I have to switch gears and I have to start calling on customers. I have to go through the rejection phase. I have to go through, going from understanding that this is what's happening with these customers and his load board to now creating something really for yourself. Kind of what was that dynamic like, and what kind of help did you get from the men and women around you, if the women had gotten there at that time, that kind of helped propel you into a more confident and comfortable state of acquiring your own book of business?
Mm-hmm. It got a lot quieter. That's for certain. We moved over. I moved desks to my own space, and all of a sudden my phones were silent. And I didn't have 30 emails coming in every 10 minutes. I was like, huh, this is weird. I don't know. I don't like how quiet it is. So that was just an adjustment period of a completely different office dynamic. Very much so felt like I was even switching careers, right? It's a fresh start. You have nothing. You're like, okay, now what? What do I do? Going out prior to that, we had lots of training as far as how to prospect, the tools you use, navigating our CRM, what kind of questions do you ask? How do you handle objections? We dug deep into that. And again, our GSM poured into us, following up. He sat in on a couple of those first phone calls that were not great.
That's always fun, right?
Yeah, it's not great. You're sitting there because we're like in a conference room. So I have my cell phone, and someone like asked a question that at that point I did not know the answer to. And I like muted it, and I was like, what does he mean? It's like, what? I don't know what that is. So yeah, definitely not pretty at first, but again, just lots of question asking, lots of following up periodically, daily checking in. How many calls did we do today? Where did we go? What can I do to help you? What's the next steps? So just lots of persistent checking in, following up was what really helped me feel comfortable. That being said, though, there's no magic secret sauce that someone can give you that makes you feel good, right?
Yeah.
When that phone is ringing on the other side and you're calling a large customer, even if it's a small customer, you're calling them and it's ringing, your heart's racing, right? Especially those first couple times. Heck, even my first couple calls now, even though I have a book of business, my heart still races a little bit. And you get the butterflies because you just don't know what's going to happen. So there is no trick. You never feel, oh, this is so easy. It's so relaxed. Yeah, you can enjoy it. You can be really good at it. Comfortable is not the word I would use, though.
That's funny because when I was at the company I was with, and even still, one thing that I found to be kind of the helpful distraction. So I like to play golf. I have golf clubs all over the house.
I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to be better.
Okay. See, look, that's all you can do, right? It's just a matter of getting in there and figuring it out, get thrown into the fire.
I had my first birdie last weekend. I did.
Congratulations.
It was a par 3. And
it doesn't matter what kind of par course it is. A birdie is a birdie.
A birdie is a birdie. On the scorecard, there was a 2. And that's what matters.
That's awesome. It's that getting that birdie is like landing that first customer. It's like and that's why I love golf. So whenever I make my calls, I tend to be like, I have a little golf mat here in the house. I tend to be over there putting on the mat or doing stuff like that whenever I'm making my calls, because it's something about, and that might just be the athlete in me, where something about that competitive edge releases the anxiety and the nervous, the butterflies that come with, okay, I'm about to pick up this phone. And something about me, I have a lovely habit of thinking that, and truly believing that, I can go after any customer on planet Earth.
Oh,
And
correct. That week
you know,
one when I was calling like Target up and being like,
yeah,
so how can I get onboarded? And they were like,
exactly.
what?
Yeah, and it's funny. People will always put their fears that they have themselves onto you, and sometimes there's no malicious intent. It's almost a safety concern, like, hey, don't waste your time calling on certain groups of people. And for me, it's like, I tell this kind of funny joke. I don't think my wife thinks it's super funny anymore, but when I was in school, I had this thing where if the team told me that there was this young lady that nobody was able to date, that was the young lady I was going to try to date.
You like the
And so,
challenge. You like the
exactly,
chase. Yeah.
and so I love the challenge of knowing that these large customers probably don't have as many people calling on them. And, it's not so much about the sell side of things, but I'm very much so a relationship oriented individual. I want to learn what you all need. I want to learn how I can provide a solution, very much so the same way that I'm building this podcast out. What can I do to help empower young women who are in sales, in logistics, and many other industries, as this has turned into in the matter of, since I reached out to you, 5 days or something like that. And so I think the big thing for me there was never let someone else's doubt of themselves come on to me. And I started, really putting that into other people. And really, I believe I changed the office dynamic a little bit, because, and I'll kind of tell a quick story about myself and my claim to fame within logistics. So last year, I don't know if you remember this or heard about it, but in North Carolina, the Pfizer location in Rocky Mount had a tornado run straight through it. So I come into the office after I had gotten out of the shower that morning, pulled up my phone. The first thing on Instagram was videos of the destruction. So I'm like, wow, I don't know what to do. I had been calling on them for the last like 2 weeks or so, just really trying to get through, sending them emails with all my information.
Mm-hmm.
I walk into the office that day, and I walk in and I say, hey, I might need somebody's help, because I'm going to try to go after whatever it is that they need. And I kid you not, like probably half of the office laughed and was just like, dude, don't waste your time. Like, you're not going to land that. And so for me, one, it was a learning moment. And there was no malicious intent there. Nobody wanted me to fail in making these calls or trying to reach out to Pfizer, but they were doing 69 billion annually at the time. And, it's not easy to get a hold of people. Thankfully, I've been using certain softwares that allow me to get people's cell phone numbers, and I'm able to get in touch with people a little bit different than a usual salesperson is. So I ended up winning that bid for that project and helping them with their storage and just trying to take some of the load off of them. And it was crazy, because when I called in, I left a message, and left a message on like 7 or 8 of their phones. I even called their security guard, and like I got in touch with
You run through. I'm gonna call every person at this company until someone picks up the phone.
Exactly.
You get further and further away from the departments, but accounting
Yep.
usually answers. I've learned.
Yeah.
Accounting is a good place to go.
And it's funny. And just side note on that, I forget who it was, but somebody was telling a story on Instagram or LinkedIn, I believe, and they said, do you know what email always gets responded to? Hey, we owe you money. Where should we send it? In the subject line. And I laughed and I said, that's kind of manipulative because you really don't owe them money. But hey, however you get through, you get through. And that was what happened with the Pfizer situation. I expressed my condolences. I understood, first of all, that could be super, super disruptive to the entire country and the products that they supply. And they ended up calling me back while I was on lunch, and I'm freaking out when I'm getting the phone calls because I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
So I get the phone calls, and long story short, they expressed the fact that I was the only person that called on them and did express the condolences of, first of all, I hope everybody is safe. Like that was a crazy tornado. I saw what happened. And however I can help, I would love to help. And so ended up, like I said, I won that bid to do the work with them. It was the first month of that project was nuts. It was, I mean, just go, go, go for 30 days
Mm-hmm.
straight. And I enjoyed it. I loved it. I love high paced work. I love fast environments, and I love helping people. So I think that, one thing I wanted to bring to the office was, bro, anything is possible. Anything is possible. It might not happen right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not everyone's going to go land a whale like Pfizer, as everybody was calling it. But as if you take the right approach and you build relationships with these people and you don't worry so much about the margin that you're getting on every
Mm-hmm.
single load that you get from every single customer, you have, in my opinion, a higher chance to build a real relationship. Bear, my dog is whining. And building a relationship where these people they end up gaining trust in you,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that leads to a lot better business than the traditional logistics mindset that at least I've heard, where it's just make those phone calls, tell the people you want the freight, and ask as many questions as you can to try to get around the gatekeepers to get to the freight keeper.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, while yes, that has its place, I think being relationship oriented, and what I feel Longship has kind of provided you all with all the tools and resources to kind of explore that relationship side of the business. I feel that's super important, and you wanted
Mm-hmm.
to touch on that. It sounds like Longship does a really good job of putting you all in a position to win.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's only so many things too that we can say, right? Like I'm very similar to you that I care a lot more about the relationship and meeting the people, understanding them, understanding their companies than I do on getting $50 out of a load, right?
Right.
That means really nothing to me in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
So, because also you have to think big picture, right? You're thinking 5, 10 year plan. You're making connections because who knows what happens, right?
Right.
So it's not just that transactional thing. I try to stay far away from that. So, yeah, I mean, you can be told that. And a lot of people are probably told that, even, at some of these bigger box brokerages, they're probably told relationship first, learn
Yeah.
about them, ask personal questions, build rapport. Goodness gracious, I've heard rapport. Like, that is a trigger word now. But it's really up to the individual brokers, right? When you're in a
Yeah.
cradle to grave model, how you run your business is how you run your business. So what works for the guy sitting next to me might not work for me. It actually probably won't work for me, right?
Right.
Because he's just different than I am. So you kind of have to play into that. Whereas, there's a guy that's super successful that I'm thinking of, and he is very much so. His strategy, he calls them pound questions, right? He over his dead body are they hanging up the phone, right?
That's
Like
hilarious. I
they're
love it.
like, stop calling me. And he's like, well, tell me more about this. Tell me, well, what
Right.
about your inbound? What about the outbound? How many cases are in a like just questions? And
Yeah.
it works for him. He closes, he's great at like that
That's
is his
awesome.
strategy and it's worked for him.
That's
However, when I try to do that, it does not go well, right? Because
same.
that's just not my personality. I am much more on the social selling aspect of things. And again, that's not anything that Longship or really anyone can tell you how to do. You kind of just got to figure out what you do naturally and how you connect with people, and then just using that for business. So for me, I really love LinkedIn. That's important to me. It has been for a while, of posting, connecting. Like I said, I went on coffee chats on Zoom when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So it's just part of my daily routine is getting on there, commenting, messaging people. So I'm going to use that now to my benefit in business. So I
Yeah.
pour a lot of time and energy into LinkedIn, whereas someone that has no presence on social media, doesn't really understand analytics or how to get, more interactions on a post, that's not going to be a good time for them, right?
Right.
They're not going to see those results, just like I won't see the results pounding phones and just asking as many questions as possible. So I'm similar to you in that regard. I think you probably relate to that
Yeah.
of there's only so much that someone can tell you how to do before you kind of just have to A/B test it yourself.
Yep. Yep. And it's funny because I will go through the lineup of questions and going to these people and breaking down their business and the different ways that we could support them, because I do think that it is important to learn about their business. And in order to do that, you do have to break down what it is they do, like you said, inbound, outbound, pallet sizes, and cases per pallet, and weight of freight, and all of those things. And I always, it's funny, not always, but a lot of times I'll sit there and I'll think, well, how would I ask my grandmother these questions? And so instead of really pounding on the question itself, I think it's more so for me about the tone of voice that I give while I'm asking these questions. And that just goes back to, like, I love to, I talked to a young lady, I don't know really how old or young she was earlier, but she sounded like she was a little bit older. I'm 30, so she probably sounded like she was in her late 30s, early 40s. And I spoke to her with a very caring tone, and I could tell that she doesn't always give people the time of day, but she gave me the time of day. Similar situation with some of these switchboard workers that I've called and have gotten in touch with, where I'll call them back every week just to check on, hey, Miss Patty, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing good. And I'll ask them, I'm like, do you remember me? And they're like, at this point, yes, Colin, I do remember you. And I love that. And I like to help people get a pat on the back. And so that was something I learned last year. My first year on the sales side of this was, how can I be, again, coming back to an empowering support system for not just the customers, but the individuals that actually are handling these warehouses and things like that. And, what support can I provide? And so, yeah, I'll talk their ear off, though. Once we have that relationship, it's like, hey, are you married? Are you going to the beach this weekend? I know y'all got nice beaches on the East Coast. And learning about just people's kids and things like that. And my dog agrees that that's a good way to go. But, what I would like to know from you is, and this will help me out as well, what would you like to see, or what have you experienced that you think other employers could do well from a supporting women in the industry, that you've seen yourself and you've also seen with how Longship has handled the young ladies who've come to work with you all, whether it be on the sales side, or I know you said y'all have another recruiter, I believe you said now.
Yeah, we have quite a few females that are in other positions, just
Yeah.
not a ton in sales, but still, pretty diverse.
Yeah. And so what do you think an employer or somebody in that management type of position could do to, I know you said dialogue. Dialogue is going to always be something that, I think comes to the top of that list, but what else do you think we could do to not only further it within individual companies, but also start to express the opportunity to more young ladies who might be looking for an opportunity in sales and business, but they don't quite understand that logistics is oh my gosh, a very lucrative opportunity for them when it comes to growing in business and sales.
I'll first start out by saying what you just said at the end is so key, that women are proven to be great at sales. Usually, one's a female in any industry, whether it's tech, software, medical device, whatever it may look like. If you hire females, they end up being some of the top producers in the company, like
Yep.
every time. And there's a reason, right? It's different.
Yeah.
So definitely we're missing a lot of just faces and opportunities because I think, and I have this theory, I talk about it all the time, that 3PLs and third party recruiting firms, very, very, very similar in who they target, how they target those, prospective new hires. They kind of look for the same kind of demographic, being recent graduates, athletes,
Yeah.
those typical people that you think of. And the job itself is very similar too, right? You get in, you train with someone else, then you go out, build your book of business, and then likewise, the pattern keeps repeating.
Right.
And in recruiting companies, it's flipped. Primarily female, a couple male employees. In logistics, it's just the opposite. But we're all doing the same thing. So we also just need to kind of target people that are in recruiting. That's a great segment into kind of that third party world. So I
Interesting.
think just starting there first is how you get more women into the office, is kind of relating it that way. And two, a lot of women don't like being the first. I love being the first at everything. I
Yeah.
think it's awesome to be a pioneer and to try new things and put yourself out there just because I know I'm confident in that and I'm not scared of rejection. My thought is always, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen, right? Say I don't get the job. Okay, well, I didn't have it before. So I'm not losing anything. Or I
Right.
didn't get that customer. Okay, well, that's fine. I didn't have that customer before. I go back to the same place, so I have nothing to lose. So just keeping that mindset and recognizing though that that's not necessarily always true. So just having those first hires is what's really hard, I think, for some companies. But oh, he's so cute. But
Bear's
once
like, I
you
have to get into the interview.
no, I love it. I love it. The more the merrier. Come on. But once you get some of those first new hires, I think you kind of start seeing the floodgates open because
Yeah.
now when we have shadows, I can relate to the women that are coming in and we can kind of talk about the dynamic and answer some of their questions that they might have. So just getting the first ones is huge. And then something that I have started to really do that is so empowering that more women should be doing is talking to each other, which sounds silly because you're like, obviously, you all should talk about things that you're, going through or just bounce sales tactics off of each other, how you're finding success as a woman. But a lot of times there's just not that space given, right? You're kind of either having to do that on your own or it's just happening in the workplace. It's not intentional. And I
Right.
think carving out time, and that's something that, I've done is saying, okay, we're having a women in logistics day. And the 4 women in our office, we're going to go to kickboxing and we're going to feel like bad A's, fill in the blank. And then
That's
we're
cool.
going to, talk about some things that we might be going through or again balance sales tactics because men and women prospect differently and you kind of have to talk through that. What does different
Yeah.
mean? What does different actually look like? So just having the space to say, okay, we're sitting down, we're reading this book together, we're listening to this podcast, okay, everyone listen to it, and then we're going to come back, we're all going to go to lunch next Friday and talk about it. Setting intentional time to focus on some of those differences and those key factors that build that community internally is huge. And I don't think a lot of companies really do that yet. I will say
That's a great point.
there's a couple brokerages in Tampa that have actually reached out to me that have been wonderful. And so we've started now doing some, competitor hangouts kind of thing. We like to talk about how, okay, we're going to pretend like we all don't work for different companies right now that do the same
Right.
thing. For the sake of this, we are all just women trying to, build a book of business, make some money, be successful.
That's
So
cool.
we talk cross brokerages, right? Now I'm going out to lunch with this wonderful group of women. And now we're talking about things that we found in our office and we're talking about things that they experienced that might be different. And if we have any input on how they could handle the situation. So you just have to kind of go back and forth and just have that intentional time. And again, that's free for brokerages to do, right? It's
Yeah.
really easy to say, oh, yeah, let's go to this conference or we can have this guest speaker come in. But that's not realistic when you're just trying to kind of start out doing some of these more, inclusive acts of building community. But
Right.
everyone can say, okay, on Friday, here, I'll foot the bill for lunch. You all go out. Let's talk about things. Or, let's come in one morning and we can just hang out prior to work and talk through some things with your leadership, maybe.
Right.
Those are just intentional times where then also the women are like, they care, right?
Yeah.
They're asking questions, they care. And just feeling validated and feeling like you're heard is very, very meaningful and impactful.
Imagine if all of these companies who are predominantly men just took, they allocated 1% of their resources to, okay, every day we're gonna allocate 1% of our resources to strictly growing the understanding of our industry, our company within the women's demographic. I mean, the the shift would be massive. And kind of to the point that you mentioned earlier, I've never really thought about the HR logistics kind of paradigm there,
Mm-hmm.
where HR, like my mother-in-law, she owns an HR firm, a staffing firm. They're HR based, and it's 100% women. And it's not that they wouldn't hire men, but men don't think, oh, let me try to get into staffing. Let me get
Mm-hmm.
into an HR type of position where I'm handling relationships on a day-to-day basis where people are going to, and in that regard I think this may be why people are going to express their frustrations, what they're feeling. They're going to express what's going through their mind on a day-to-day basis, and not very many men are adequately prepared to handle those types of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just because they don't get to practice. And I think that's something, and that's why like, even I was talking to a friend of mine earlier. I want to hire 90% women. And I don't care what industry they come from. It
Yep.
doesn't matter to me. I love the fact that women are, one, they're vocal. They might not be vocal in environments that don't invite them to be vocal, but if you give them the platform to be, they're going to let their voices be heard, and they're going to tell you 9 times out of 10 exactly how they feel, again, if you
Mm-hmm.
empower them to do so. And it's funny, I was talking with a couple of the new hires yesterday and today, and it's kind of funny to me because I didn't expect people to be as excited about this opportunity. I mean, this is a startup. Like,
Yes.
I don't just have unlimited resources and
Mm-hmm.
salaries to go around for everybody. But after them hearing just my mindset when it comes to why am I trying to hire women like I am, and what I think they bring to the table, it just blew my mind that the majority of them have said, you know, we haven't really heard a man who's in this type of position in a startup coming to women and saying, I know I need you. And I don't understand the dynamic of men trying to live this like Stone Age, we're all cavemen, run through walls, break down stuff, kill dinosaurs. Like, I need as many women around me as possible
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to make me dot my I's. They're going to make me cross my T's. They're going to make sure that the things are flowing the way that they need to be
Mm-hmm.
flowing. And I have found I've run a few different businesses. My wife owns her own business, and we've done multiple things together. And I'm always the most successful when I allow the women to give me feedback and to also empower me in the things that I'm good at, because
Mm-hmm.
all that leads to is me being able to empower them. So I'm going to take the HR point that you made, and I'm going to start looking and recruiting in those sectors, because it would really change the trajectory of the next 3 to 5 years of business if there is the ability to help women transition into
Mm-hmm.
a very, very lucrative industry and opportunity that they may have never even considered or thought about, just because of how male dominated it is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think an important distinction too to make is that the job itself, what you are doing day to day, is very, very similar. What you're selling might be different, right? It's packaged
Right,
different. You come about a different way. You're talking to different people, but you're cold calling and you're selling a third party service.
right.
So you're already there. And
That's
I think
so
that's kind of the whole
interesting.
holdup is that when, we're trying to recruit women into logistics or men into staffing, there's that holdup of, oh my gosh, I'm going into logistics. I felt it. I was, oh my goodness gracious, I'm going to be talking to truckers all day. And that was intimidating. And now I love my truck, right? Like I love my carriers. It's very different. But up front, you're like, it doesn't seem glamorous.
Right.
Staffing, similar. For women, it feels natural. You're like, yeah, HR is great. We're lots of women. We're pouring into it. This is wonderful. It's just packaged nicer. And then for men, like you said, it's like, that's a lot of feelings. I don't really want to be, dealing with recruiting. Like that just feels, not for me. I want to be more tactical. And it's okay. The job itself is identical. So who cares what you're selling? As long as you're good at sales, you'll be successful in any industry.
Right. I love that you made that correlation for me. And I think that hopefully that also helps the men who watch this episode through and they take that to heart, because I think the most successful men have powerful women behind them, and the most successful women have powerful men alongside them. So that's what this is all about. And so we've kind of answered that, but what advice for any women that are looking to get into logistics or sales opportunities like such, what kind of advice would you give them, especially those that are just getting out of school and they're looking for that dream job, and maybe it isn't something they take forever, but what advice would you give to them and kind of helping them break through and also helping them find the confidence to take that next step and take that leap, even though it might feel slightly uncomfortable, whether it is advice about understanding the industry or, advice about how to kind of handle themselves and how to ask for the dialogue and the things that you got from a great company like Longship that could potentially help them not only be good in the industry and good with sales themselves, but also help them be a beneficial factor for some of these other companies who really might need that push to understanding, here's how you can help these women break through in the industry.
Yeah, so I'll answer that in the two separate parts of understanding the industry, and then that second part of advice for just the general workplace dynamic. So firstly, as far as the industry goes, is don't do anything halfway. And I think that applies to both men and women when you're coming into something new, but particularly women, is don't back down. Like you have to ask a lot of questions to learn something that you know nothing about. You can't just view it as your 8 to 5, right? Everyone knows that to be true, that you have to pour a lot of energy and effort into just being a sponge those first couple months. So, that means talking to carriers, asking them what they haul, who they like hauling for, issues they face, understanding that. If it's talking to the number one broker in your company and saying, hey, I need to hear how you close this customer. What do you do? Can I sit with you for a couple hours? Putting yourself out there that way. I'm very into market analytics because I do all of my own quoting. So reading the graphs, looking at the stats, talking with, people from the DAT analytics team. We go back and forth on LinkedIn multiple times a week of, hey, what are you seeing? Oh, that's interesting. This is what I've been seeing. Does this relate? Like pouring into the statistics, learning about it, just trying to absorb as much as you can, as quickly as you can, to build that confidence. Because you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it, right?
Right.
You're going to be asked things, you're going to be put in situations, and you never want to feel like you are underprepared or you are incompetent. You want to walk in always feeling like, I know a lot, right? I might not know everything, but I know a heck of a lot that I will be shocked if they ask me something I don't know at this point. And that just comes from learning it. And you got to do it up front. That way you build that confidence, right? Women tend to not apply for jobs that they feel underqualified for. While as men, if they have one of the qualifications for a job, they're submitting an application. So that's been proved by recruiters. They talk about that all the time. Same thing goes for, asking for a promotion. Women always ask for less money than a man, no matter what their performance and experience is. So we kind of have, to have a chip on our shoulder and say, okay, I'm going to over exceed expectations and just absolutely dominate That way I, again, feel like I can call those massive enterprise shippers with no hesitation. I might still
Right.
have a little bit of a fast, quick heartbeat, but I feel competent and I actually have something I can offer them where it's mutually beneficial. And again, that
Right.
just comes from knowledge and learning a lot. Also, I think it's really interesting to talk to carriers. I think more people, on the kind of executive side, if they have a carrier rep team, they just feel disconnected from the operations. And I
Yeah.
think that is a huge mistake. I, again, luckily am, booking all of my own loads, doing all of my own check calls. So I am very in touch with the market and what's happening. But if I wasn't, I would be calling up carriers. I'd be calling out to carriers and asking, hey, what are the trends looking like? Or what's going on with avocado season this year? There was a lot of rain. Well, how is that impacting melons coming out of Florida? Because they know. And
Yeah.
you got to just ask them, right? Like some of these guys have been driving for 40 years.
Yeah.
How you are making a mistake if you don't look to them as a resource.
That's
So
so
that's
true.
what I would do as far as the industry is you just have to learn a lot and you have to exceed expectations to build your confidence.
And before you go on to the workplace
Mm-hmm.
side of things, there's something I learned from Alex Hormozy. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah, I've heard the name. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So something he said in a couple of speeches that I've watched, motivation is it's an unnecessary desire. And what we should do is we should execute on things that give us um, that give us a delivery of our competency. So we have to execute on these tasks so that we understand that we do have the competency to continue. Because
Mm-hmm.
motivation, if you wake up hoping to feel motivated, 6 days out of the week you're going to have a bad day, and then Sunday is going to be the only day you have a good day, and then you got to
Mm-hmm.
get back to work on Monday. And
Yep.
I think that the way that you worded that is very insightful, because I think when you do get in and you get thrown into the fire and you welcome the fire, you get through the fire a lot quicker. Whereas if
Mm-hmm.
you get kind of flustered in that fire, you end up running in circles. And now the burns, they get deeper and deeper. And then you start to lose that confidence that really should come from the evidence of your competency, which comes from just doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I mean, that's something I think a lot of people face, right? Like even as a new hire, I have so many customers that have no idea how long I've been in logistics and they make statements of, that was so insightful. Wow, how long have you been? Like they just assume I've been doing this for, 5+ years because of how I present myself and what I know. And again, that's
I would
not
think the same.
exactly, that's not luck, right?
Right.
That's not just something that happens. It's because again, up front, I knew, okay, I have a lot to learn. I kind of again have to have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder because at day one, obviously, when he was like, answer the phone, I'm incompetent. I have no idea what I'm doing. I am lost. But I fought that. And everyone just has to fight it. You just have to dig deep. And like you said, you just have to get through the fire. Once you get through it and you say, okay, that I survived,
Right.
might not have been easy. And I might have had a lot of stressful nights. As a woman, you might have cried. I cried in my car the first day. Like we all did. Every female in our office has shared that experience of you're like, you just have to step outside for like 2 seconds. You just have a single tear that trickles
Yep.
down, and then you go back in the office and jump back in, right?
Yep.
Like it happens. But once you get on the other side of it, you look back and you're, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that. And now going forward, now when we have new hires come in, I tell them day one, I'm like, okay, it's gonna suck, but the way you overcome it sucking is by just becoming more knowledgeable.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
And then so now moving on to the workplace, what is it that we could do as employers, as colleagues, as others in the industry that will help us grow the ability for women to enter the industry, and not just enter it, but
Hmm.
to succeed. And I know every company is different, but I feel like, you've clearly shown that you have competency, not just in the logistics sell side of things, but the dynamic that is
Mhm.
necessary to help men and women succeed. So I'm very interested in hearing what you would like to see from others in the industry as people like myself continue to try to help expand and reach out and bring women into the industry and empower them for success.
Of course. So the first thing that I think is important that I say here is that, like you pointed out, that every company is different based on how that company is branded and what they want to be like. The reason I
Mm-hmm.
chose Longship over other 3PLs, there were many reasons, but one of the biggest ones was that they did not have the beer drops on Friday, everyone wears jerseys, sports games on the TVs. That was not the culture. It was very business like. I'm business casual, business professional in my appearance every day. When we talk on the phone, we are professional. In my emails, they're more formal. And that's just something that really I resonated with. That's just part of my personality is I prefer
Yeah.
that over the hyper casual culture. So that's why I chose the company to begin with. So Longship did a great job at including women in that way of just saying, you don't have to be, a crazy party boy to do well in our company, right?
Right.
We actually prefer that you don't, because that's just not what our company is all about. And if that is what your company is all about, though, that is okay, right? There's a lot of companies that have thrived in sort of that culture. And that's not meaning that they need to change that, because obviously it's worked for them. Just you have to find the way to include the women and the other people of diverse backgrounds in it.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, I haven't lived that culture, so I don't necessarily know what I personally would have connected with the most. My assumption would be that if you're doing golf outings, right, every month, or you're playing sports on the TV and that's all you talk about, right, when you're bringing in a female that might not play golf or might not know anything about sports, it's kind of isolating because they're not able to connect with you on anything.
Right.
So our office does a good job of like, okay, we're going to play music. We're going to talk about music. We're going to talk about, plans over the weekend. We're going to find conversations that we can all kind of relate to. And then that way we kind of get to know each other easier. And yeah, they still talk about sports
Yeah.
24/7, right? I still hear a lot about it. But I also know that they're very invested in. I used to be involved in, I danced in college. That was just a part of my life.
Nice.
And there was dance team college nationals in Orlando one weekend a couple months ago. And they asked me about it. And we were talking about, dance and cheerleading and just things that I knew about that they didn't know about,
Yeah.
but they just wanted to hear about it because I cared. Right. And again, that goes back to just asking questions. So you have to think, okay, intentionally, I'm going to talk about things that everyone can contribute to. And that you doesn't mean again that you have to completely change or not talk about things that you enjoy. Please talk about your passions, of course, but every now and again I need to intentionally think to myself, okay, I have, this wonderful woman that's shadowing that hasn't said a word because she has nothing to talk about. I'm going to ask her, what her hobbies are. And then we're going to make conversation like normal people would,
Right.
right? You have friends of other genders outside of the workplace, or you have a spouse, or you've just been around them. So act like you normally would just in the
Right.
workplace. It doesn't have to be so separated or so, I have to say this to sound perfect. Like just be yourself, right? Like you
Right.
have friends, just make a new one, And
That's
I think if
funny.
you kind of come at it with that approach, you'll just connect, with that. And then as far as advice for women, and kind of how to handle that dynamic on their part is you got to speak up,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it's so hard and it puts you in an uncomfortable place sometimes. But if there's been no woman before you, the guys just might not know. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow sometimes, is that guys sometimes are a little ignorant at,
Yep.
culture, or like saying things that might be inappropriate and might make someone feel uncomfortable. They just might be ignorant to it. And the only way you stop it is by saying something.
Yep.
And again, it doesn't have to be a you go to HR and you have a whole thing. It can just be simple. Hey, like, that's not cool. Or why are we talking about that? That's weird. Or, maybe if they're making jokes, and a lot of times a female joke might slide in, or, just like taking a jab at someone by
That
insulting
locker
someone
room
else.
talk.
Yeah, exactly. Very much so. And I'll be the first, they all know that, like, I'm going to say something. I stand up and I cock my head over and I make eye contact, and they're like, sorry. I'm like, okay, as long as you know that you should have said that, we're good.
Right.
So it just a lot of that, and having that kind of friendly banter. And again, that comes from knowing each other and feeling comfortable with each other. But I'm zero tolerance in our office, and they all know it. When they say something that's questionable, now I even sometimes they stand up and look at me expecting that I'm going to say something. So once you have that kind of rapport and they know, okay, it's not cool to take jabs at women, or it's not cool to say something that's going to make her uncomfortable,
Yeah.
they just stop doing it. And, those things happen less and less. So it's scary the first time as a female to be like, hey, we're not going to do this going forward. But once you do it and you can laugh about it and you can, just be lighthearted, then it just changes everything. So that's my main piece of wisdom for women coming in is tell them when they're messing up, because they just don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, look, that's the whole reason I'm trying to surround myself with a strong team of women, because, and I mean in every aspect, like it's, I've had one podcast project where I worked with, it was me, two other men, and one young lady who really she was still in school. So like the dynamic wasn't quite yet established for her to really stand on her 2 feet and speak her mind. But it was the podcast I had on ESPN, and it fell apart because the expectation within not even just all of the men, but just one of them, he was very much dead set on, hey, we're going to talk like we're on sports talk, and we're going to talk crazy, and we're going to banter. And I was like, this just don't feel right, bro. It just don't
like,
feel right. And,
this is
and
forced.
I'm having to say it, like we just can't do that. This isn't the time for that, man. And too many women are going to hear this. And I do not want women looking at me like, Colin, this isn't right. And I think you are somebody that's laying a great foundation for women to come at Longship and with other companies. And I hope that you have many more conversations like this on podcasts. And I look forward to our next conversation, because I definitely have to have you back on. You speak very well. You speak very highly of the people that you're around. And I think that, like you said, getting into the community and making an impact that way with other women in the industry, I think you're doing great things. And, I'm excited to hear about your future success stories. And I'm proud to have been able to have you on as the first guest for EmpowerHER. And
yes, great. I know, great things to come. Hopefully it was a good one. Hopefully people took away something. Maybe. I don't know.
Sure
that's the goal, right? But if not, that's okay too.
It is, as long as if they clicked in, then great. And
that's fine. We're making progress. You have to start somewhere.
For sure. But I think a lot of people are going to get something out of this, and I'll make sure that I do my job at putting it out there for them to get something out of it too. But are there any closing thoughts or just little bits, tid pieces that you would like to leave here with, whether it's promoting yourself, your services at Longship, whatever it is that you have that you want to throw out there? Put it out there, and we'll make sure it gets to the people.
Say my piece. I'm not going to elevator pitch. I think my work sometimes speaks for itself. But what I will say is this is just a life tidbit. It's something that I live by. It's, the hashtag that takes the place of a job description on my LinkedIn profile is like cares about things. Yeah. I think that is such a key point to life in general. Yes, workplace, yes, relationships, but also just to be a human and to care. Caring is so critical, and people just stop at some point, right? They think, oh, if there's nothing in it for me, I'm just not going to do it. But I think that's a terrible way to live. And so just find what you care about, right? For me, I'm very in touch with my faith. So I care a lot about religion. I care a lot about my community. I'm really involved with our Chamber of Commerce. So, I'm sitting in on meetings. I listen to what's going on in the local government, how I can help. Even though, right, other people that might be my age that have only been in the city for a year might not feel like they can do anything, but you can. You just have to care and you have to try. Again, in the workplace, caring about diversity, caring about inclusion, caring about leadership, finding places to be a servant leader. Everyone knows leadership isn't a job title, it's what you do and how you carry yourself. So, just actually caring about things is so important. So, that's just my one thing I try to preach to everyone is just find something that you care about. For you, it might not be government. It might not be your local community, but it might be an awesome philanthropy that you're a part of, or it might be your particular hobby. Maybe it is sports, but just find something and actually care about it. And I think that is the key to just life fulfillment.
That's awesome. And congratulations on your baptism as
Oh,
well.
thank you.
That's
Thank
really
you.
awesome. Yeah, my cousin-in-law, she got baptized the same day, and so
Oh, wow. That's
that was
awesome.
really cool to see. Yeah. So Rachel, thank you very much for being a guest and having such a wonderful conversation. Like I said, I hope everybody gets something out of this, and I hope that I was able to provide you with a platform that makes you feel like you were empowered and you got to speak your mind and provide people with tidbits of information that hopefully these young women and men can use in the industry. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, the first episode of Empower Her comes to a close.